I should have sensed something was wrong from the hushed phone calls, the vague responses to my questions, the way Daniel and Rebecca suddenly stopped sharing family updates on our group chat. But grief has a way of clouding your judgment, especially when you're 7,000 miles away trying to coordinate a refugee housing project during monsoon season. The email came on a Tuesday. I was hunched over my laptop in a makeshift office in Myanmar, the ceiling fan doing little against the oppressive heat. My phone pinged with a notification, and there it was, a message from my brother Daniel with the subject line, "Family business concluded." My heart dropped as I opened it. 4 sentences. That's all he needed to tell me they had divided our parents' inheritance, sold the family business, and liquidated most of our childhood home's contents. 4 sentences to erase my place in the family legacy. The attorney has finalized everything. Your share has been deposited in your account. Rebecca and I felt it was best not to burden you while you're doing your humanitarian work. We hope you understand. $32,000. That's what appeared in my account the next day. $32,000 for a business our father had built from nothing, for the home that had been in our family for 3 generations, for the antiques our mother had carefully collected throughout her marriage. $32,000 when I absolutely knew, it should have been 10 times that amount. I sat there, my coffee growing cold, reading and rereading the email until my vision blurred, the betrayal cut deeper than any knife. The same siblings who had stood beside me at our parents' funeral just 8 months ago, who had hugged me and promised we'd get through this together, had waited until I boarded a plane to divide everything that was left of our parents' legacy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The humidity in Myanmar felt like a living thing, pressing against my skin as I moved through the crowded streets toward my apartment. Every face I passed seemed to blur together as Daniel's email played on repeat in my mind. I had called him 5 times since receiving it. No answer. I'd called Rebecca too, straight to voicemail. My modest apartment felt emptier than usual that night. Rain pelted against the windows as I sank onto my bed, phone in hand, staring at the pathetic bank notification. $32,000. My parents' estate had been worth millions, not because we were extraordinarily wealthy, but because they had been extraordinarily careful. The import business alone had been appraised at $1, $8 million after Dad's death. The house in Portland's rising market was worth at least $950,000. And Mom's antique collection? Several pieces were museum quality, handed down through generations. I pulled up my last video call with Mom, just 3 weeks before the stroke that took her 6 months after Dad's heart attack. Her face filled my screen, laughter lines crinkling around her eyes. "Emily, sweetheart," she'd said, "I'm so proud of the work you're doing. Your father would have been too, even if he never quite understood why you chose aid work over the family business." I pressed my hand against the screen, wishing I could feel her warmth one more time. "Daniel and Rebecca are handling things here," she had continued. "But I've made arrangements. Everything will be divided fairly when the time comes." Arrangements. What arrangements? What had happened to those arrangements? I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my email, scrolling through months of correspondences. There, from 2 weeks after Mom's funeral, an email from Mark Sullivan, the family attorney. I'd skimmed it at the time, too deep in grief and too focused, on the Myanmar project that had become my lifeline. It mentioned documents requiring my signature at your convenience, and no rush on this matter. No rush. Of course there was no rush. Daniel and Rebecca had made sure of that. My hands trembled as I dialed Mark Sullivan's number, not caring that it was the middle of the night in Portland. To my surprise, he answered on the 3rd ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Emily, is everything all right?" "They sold everything," I said, my voice breaking. "Daniel and Rebecca. They divided the inheritance without me. A long pause. Then, that's not possible. What do you mean it's not possible? It's done. They told me it's done. Another pause. Emily, they can't finalize anything without your signature. Your mother was very clear about that. The room seemed to tilt. What are you talking about? The letter, he said. The instructions Margaret left. Everything was to be divided equally, but only after all 3 children had agreed to the terms. Daniel and Rebecca may have sold some assets, but legally, nothing can be finalized without your consent. I gripped the phone tighter. What letter? I never received any letter. Mark's voice shifted, professional concern replacing sleepiness. Emily, your mother left a sealed letter with specific instructions. It was to be opened only when all 3 of you were present. Daniel told me you had reviewed it via video call. The betrayal crystallized in that moment, sharp and clear. Daniel had lied. To me, to our mother's attorney. He and Rebecca had orchestrated this entire thing, counting on my distance and distraction to cut me out of decisions that should have been made together. I'm coming home, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Don't tell them I called you. Don't tell them anything. I hung up and stared at the rain beating against my window. 8 months of grief. 8 months of throwing myself into work to avoid the pain of losing both parents within half a year of each other. 8 months of trusting that my siblings were handling our parents' affairs with the same loyalty and love that had supposedly bonded our family. What a fool I'd been. My director was understanding when I requested emergency leave. Family emergency was all I needed to say. Within 48 hours, I had arranged for Jason to take over my projects, packed a single suitcase, and boarded a plane for the 26-hour journey back to Portland. I didn't tell Daniel or Rebecca I was coming. Let them be surprised. Let them face me in person and explain how they could betray not just me, but our parents' wishes. As the plane lifted into the clouds above Myanmar, I felt something shift inside me. The grief that had been my constant companion these past months hardened into something else. A resolve I hadn't felt since I'd stood in a devastated village 4 years ago and promised myself I would make a difference. This wasn't just about money. This was about honor, about truth, about making sure our parents' final wishes weren't corrupted by greed. I closed my eyes as the plane leveled off, Mom's voice echoing in my memory. I've made arrangements, Emily. Everything will be divided fairly. I was going to make sure of it. Portland greeted me with its familiar misty rain, so different from Myanmar's monsoons. The air felt clean, cool against my skin as I stepped out of the airport. I hadn't told anyone I was coming back, not even Olivia, my best friend since college. This homecoming needed to be on my terms. I checked into a downtown hotel rather than calling any friends for a place to stay. I needed space to think, to plan. My body ached with jet lag, but my mind raced. First thing tomorrow, I would meet with Mark Sullivan. Then I would confront my siblings. As I unpacked my single suitcase, my phone pinged with a text from Daniel. Just checking in. How's Myanmar? The casual audacity of it made my blood boil. He was checking in now. After weeks of ignored calls, after liquidating our family legacy. Behind my back? I left the message unanswered and fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of my mother's hands sorting through her precious antiques, carefully explaining the history of each piece. This will all be yours someday, she'd always said, meaning all of us, her 3 children who she believed would honor each other as much as they honored her treasures. Morning came too quickly. I showered, dressed in the one business outfit. I'd packed, a simple black dress that had served for both our parents' funerals, and headed to Mark Sullivan's office downtown. His receptionist did a double take when I walked in. Miss Chen, we weren't expecting you. I'm sure you weren't, I said, forcing a smile. Is Mark available? She hesitated, then nodded. He just finished a call. I'll let him know you're here." Mark Sullivan looked exactly as I remembered, silver-haired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Those eyes widened when he saw me, then softened with something like relief. "Emily," he said, rising from behind his desk. "I'm glad you're here. I wish it were under better circumstances." He gestured for me to sit. "I assume you want to discuss your mother's estate." "I want to discuss how my siblings tried to steal my inheritance," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Mark nodded solemnly. "I had my suspicions when Daniel said you'd reviewed everything remotely. It didn't align with Margaret's wishes." "Tell me about this letter," I said. "What exactly did my mother arrange?" Mark opened a drawer and removed a thick folder. "Margaret came to see me about 3 weeks before her stroke. She was concerned." "About what?" "About tensions between your siblings regarding the business. Your father had always assumed Daniel would take over, but in his final months, he'd expressed doubts. Margaret wanted to ensure all 3 of you had equal say in what happened after she was gone." He pulled out a sealed envelope from the folder. My mother's handwriting was unmistakable on the front. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "For my children to be opened together." "This was to be opened with all 3 of you present," Mark explained. "Margaret was very specific about that. No decisions about the estate were to be made until you had all reviewed its contents together." I stared at the envelope. "And yet, somehow Daniel and Rebecca have spent the past several months selling off everything our parents owned." Mark's expression tightened. "They've been aggressive in moving forward with certain liquidations. But legally, nothing is finalized. Your signature is required on all the official documents, which is why I reached out to you multiple times." "Those emails you sent that mentioned documents at my convenience?" He nodded. "Daniel assured me you were fully informed and had agreed to let them handle the paperwork given your location. He said you'd sign everything when you returned. The calculated deception made me feel physically ill. Daniel had gambled that I would trust him, that I would sign whatever was put in front of me when I eventually returned." "What happens now?" I asked. Mark slid the envelope across the desk to me. "Legally, this belongs to all 3 of you. But given the circumstances, I believe Margaret would want you to know its contents." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over my mother's handwriting. "Is it a will?" "No, the will is straightforward. Equal division of assets among the 3 children. This is something more personal. Margaret's wishes for how things should be handled." I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. "Did she tell you what's in here?" "Only in general terms. She wanted to ensure the business remained intact if possible. She was concerned about certain family heirlooms, and she wanted to make sure you especially weren't overlooked." "Me? Why me specifically?" Mark's expression softened. "She was proud of your work, Emily, but she worried that your distance, both geographical and from the family business, might lead to your brothers and sister dismissing your input." My throat tightened. Even in her final weeks, Mom had been trying to protect me, to ensure I wasn't pushed aside in exactly the way Daniel and Rebecca had attempted. "What's the best way to proceed?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Legally? We need to call a meeting. All documents your siblings have prepared regarding the estate need to be reviewed by you before anything can be finalized." I tapped the envelope against my palm, decision crystallizing. "Don't call them. I want to see their faces when I walk in unannounced." Mark frowned. "Emily, this doesn't have to be confrontational." "They made it confrontational when they lied to me, lied to you, and tried to cheat me out of my inheritance," I said, standing. "Where are they meeting today?" "I believe they're at the business, meeting with potential buyers." "Of course they were." I tucked the envelope into my bag and headed for the door, then paused. "Thank you, Mark, for being honest with me." "I'm just honoring Margaret's wishes," he said quietly, "which is what we all should be doing." Chen Family Imports occupied a sprawling warehouse in Portland's industrial district. I'd spent summers there as a teenager, learning inventory systems from Dad, watching him negotiate with suppliers. Daniel had worked there full-time since college. Rebecca had never shown much interest until recently. Apparently, the prospect of selling it had rekindled her family loyalty. I pulled my rental car into the familiar parking lot, heart pounding as I spotted both their vehicles. They were here, both of them. For a moment, I sat frozen, the enormity of the confrontation ahead making it hard to breathe. Then my phone pinged with a text from Daniel, replying to my continued silence. "Everything okay? Let us know you're safe." The concern would have seemed genuine if I didn't know better. I grabbed my bag, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the building that had been our family's legacy for over 30 years. The front office looked different, emptier, with outlines on the walls where photos had hung. Mom's desk, where she'd handled the books until Dad's death, was bare. Even the lucky cat figurine that had sat there for decades was gone. Voices drifted from the conference room. I followed them, each step fueling my resolve. Through the glass walls, I could see them. Daniel in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary in Myanmar. Rebecca gesturing animatedly as she spoke to 3 men in business attire. I pushed open the door without knocking. The conversation stopped abruptly. 4 heads turned toward me. Rebecca's mouth fell open. "Emily?" Daniel recovered more quickly, professional smile sliding into place. "Emily? What a surprise!" He moved toward me, arms outstretched for a hug. "Why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I stepped back, avoiding his embrace. "Probably for the same reason you didn't tell me you were selling our parents' business." The room went silent. The potential buyers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Daniel's smile tightened. "We should discuss this privately." He turned to the men. "Gentlemen, could we reschedule? Family matter." The men couldn't leave fast enough, mumbling awkward goodbyes as they gathered their materials. When the door closed behind them, Rebecca was the first to speak. "What are you doing, Emily? We've been working on this deal for months." "Working on it without me, you mean?" Daniel sighed, all pretense of surprise gone. "You're in Myanmar. You've made it clear you have no interest in the business. We were handling things." "Handling things? Is that what you call selling off? Our parents' legacy behind my back and depositing a fraction of what it's worth into my account?" Rebecca crossed her arms. "We sent you your share." $32,000? I cut in. For a business worth nearly $2 million? For a house worth close to $1 million? For Mom's antiques that have been appraised at over $300,000? Daniel had the decency to look uncomfortable. "The business has liabilities you don't know about. The house needed repairs before selling. There were taxes, fees. Save it," I said, pulling the sealed envelope from my bag. "I've spoken to Mark Sullivan." Their expressions shifted, Daniel's to calculation, Rebecca's to something like fear. "He told me about Mom's letter," I continued. "The one that was supposed to be opened with all 3 of us present. The one you told him I'd already reviewed." Daniel's jaw tightened. "We were going to discuss that with you." "When? After everything was sold? After the deals were finalized? After you divided everything the way you wanted?" Rebecca stepped forward. "Emily, be reasonable. You're never here. You chose to leave. Daniel and I have been handling everything while you've been off saving the world." The dismissal in her tone was nothing new. Rebecca had always seen my humanitarian work as some sort of phase, a naive idealism that took me away from real responsibilities. "Mom and Dad wanted all 3 of us to decide together," I said. "They trusted us to honor that." "They trusted us to be practical," Daniel countered. The business is failing, Emily. Dad's contracts dried up after he died. The market's changed. Selling now is the smart move. Then you should have convinced me of that. Instead, you lied. I placed the envelope on the conference table. Mark says nothing is finalized without my signature. Nothing. Daniel's expression darkened. You're going to what? Hold everything up out of spite? I'm going to make sure our parents' wishes are respected, I said, starting with this letter that was meant for all of us. I broke the seal on the envelope, pulled out several handwritten pages in our mother's elegant script, and began to read aloud. My dear children, if you're reading this, I've joined your father, and the three of you are now facing decisions about the legacy we've left behind. I know this isn't easy. Grief makes even simple choices difficult, and these choices are far from simple. First, know that everything your father and I built was meant for all three of you, equally and without reservation. Daniel, your father always saw your business acumen. Rebecca, he admired your determination. And Emily, though you chose a different path, he respected your courage more than you'll ever know. The business is yours to decide upon together. If you choose to sell, so be it. If you choose to continue, even better. But this must be a unanimous decision. The house holds our history. Consider carefully before letting it go. As for my personal collections, I've itemized on the attached pages which pieces should go to each of you. These are not suggestions, but my final wishes. Finally, there is the matter of the trust your father and I established. This was always meant to be divided equally, but with a purpose. We built our lives on the belief that prosperity brings responsibility. Use your inheritance wisely. Honor what we've taught you. Remember that family, true family, stands together even in disagreement. That is our greatest legacy to you. With eternal love, Mom. My voice broke on the final words. I looked up to see tears streaming down Rebecca's face. Daniel had turned. Away, shoulders rigid. There's more, I said, shuffling to the next pages. Specific instructions about her antiques, about Dad's collections, about the family photos and heirlooms. I looked directly at Daniel. Nothing about liquidating everything as quickly as possible and cutting me out. We didn't cut you out, he said, still not facing me. We were making necessary decisions. Against Mom's explicit wishes, I countered. She wanted us to decide, together. Rebecca wiped her eyes. We thought it would be easier for you. You're doing important work. We didn't want to burden you. Don't, I said, my voice hardening. Don't pretend this was for my benefit. I laid the letter on the table between us. I'm staying in Portland until this is resolved properly. All sales are on hold. All liquidations. Stop immediately. We're going to go through everything, the business finances, the house, the collections, together, as Mom wanted. Daniel finally turned back, his expression unreadable. And if we disagree? Then nothing happens until we find a compromise, I said. That's how families are supposed to work. I gathered the pages and returned them to my bag. I've booked a hotel for the week. I expect full access to all financial records, all appraisals, all offers, everything. As I walked toward the door, Rebecca called after me. Emily, wait. Where are you staying? We can talk about this. I paused, looking back at my siblings. The brother who had always thought he knew best, the sister who had always followed, is lead. For a moment, I saw us as children, playing in the warehouse while Dad worked, Mom bringing us snacks and reminding us to be careful among the inventory. We're past talking, I said quietly. Now we're going to listen to what Mom and Dad actually wanted. Starting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Here. I left without waiting for their response, the weight of my mother's letter like a shield against the anger and betrayal that had driven me home. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And for the first time since receiving Daniel's email in Myanmar, I felt something beyond rage. I felt my mother's presence, guiding me to fight not just for my inheritance, but for the truth of what she and Dad had wanted for all of us. As I drove away from Chen Family Imports, rain began to fall again, gentle, persistent, washing the city clean. The hotel room felt sterile, nothing like the warmth of the home I grew up in. I spread the pages of Mom's letter across the bed, reading and rereading her words until they blurred before my eyes. The digital clock on the nightstand flashed 2:17 a.m., but jet lag and adrenaline kept sleep at bay. Outside, Portland's rain tapped gently against the window, a rhythm so different from Myanmar's torrential downpours. I reached for my phone, hesitating before dialing Olivia's number. It was late, but if anyone would understand the magnitude of what I was facing, it would be her. She answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep. "Emily? Is that you?" "I'm back in Portland," I said, the words catching in my throat. "What? Since when? Why didn't you tell me?" The sleepiness vanished from her voice. "It's complicated. Daniel and Rebecca. They tried to divide everything without me." A sharp intake of breath. "You're kidding." I explained everything. The email, the insulting deposit, Mark Sullivan's revelation, and finally, Mom's letter. With each word, the reality of my siblings' betrayal settled deeper into my bones. Those sneaky little... Olivia cut herself off. I knew something was off. Rebecca's been flashing around a new car, talking about investing in property. Daniel's been meeting with those developers who've been buying up buildings downtown. My stomach twisted. They've been spending the money already? Money that isn't even legally theirs yet? Looks that way? A pause. "Where are you staying? You should come here." I glanced around the impersonal hotel room. "Thanks, but I need space to think. I'm meeting them tomorrow at the warehouse, going through everything. Want backup? I throw a mean right hook if needed." The offer drew a reluctant smile from me. "Rain check on the violence, but I'll call if I need moral support." After we hung up, I returned to the papers spread across the bed. Beyond Mom's letter were pages of itemized lists, antiques designated for each child, family heirlooms with notes about their significance, details about accounts and investments. So much thought, so much care put into ensuring her legacy would be preserved and shared fairly. And Daniel and Rebecca had ignored it all. Morning came too quickly. I showered, dressed in clothes borrowed from hotel guest services since I'd packed for Myanmar's heat, not Portland's chill, and drove to Chen Family Imports with a resolve hardened by night's reflection. Daniel's car was already in the lot when I arrived exactly at 9 a.m. Of course he'd be early. He'd always been the one striving to prove himself to Dad, to be the perfect son, the perfect businessman. Too bad his definition of perfection apparently included betraying his sister. The warehouse's familiar scent hit me as I entered. Cardamom, sandalwood, the faint trace of jasmine from the incense Mom used to burn in the office for good luck. For a moment, I was 12 again, running through the aisles while Dad called after me to be careful around the fragile items. Daniel looked up from his laptop as I entered the conference room. His expression was guarded, professional. The face he showed clients, not family. "You're on time," he said, as if this were any ordinary business meeting. "Where's Rebecca?" He checked his watch. "Running late. School drop-off issues with Zach." I'd almost forgotten Rebecca had a son, my nephew, who I'd only seen in photos for the past 2 years. Another casualty of distance. I set my bag down on the table. "Then we'll start without her. I want to see all the financial records. Everything." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he opened his laptop. "I have the spreadsheets here. The business has been struggling since Dad died. His personal relationships with suppliers weren't transferable." "Show me." He turned the screen toward me. Columns of numbers, declining revenues, increasing costs. It painted a bleak picture, but something felt off. "These projections seem pessimistic," I said, pointing to future earnings estimates. "And why is the inventory valuation so low? Last time I checked, the Ming Dynasty reproduction pieces alone were worth over $200,000. Daniel shifted in his seat. "Market fluctuations, authenticity concerns raised by potential buyers. Concerns that weren't an issue when Dad was alive?" His eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating that these numbers don't add up. Where are the original appraisals?" Before he could answer, Rebecca burst in, designer handbag swinging wildly from her arm, hair perfectly styled despite her alleged rush. "Sorry I'm late. Zach had a meltdown about his science project." She faltered when she saw us, the tension in the room palpable. "What did I miss?" "Emily thinks we're cooking the books," Daniel said, voice clipped. "I think the business valuation is suspiciously low," I corrected. "Convenient for selling quickly and at a price point that might benefit the buyers more than us." Rebecca dropped into a chair. "Emily, be reasonable. You haven't been involved in years. You don't know how things have changed. Then explain it to me. Show me the inventory. Let me see the appraisals. If everything's above board, you should have no problem being transparent." They exchanged glances, a silent communication that excluded me, just as they always had. Big brother, middle sister, the united front against the baby of the family who'd chosen a different path. "Fine," Daniel finally said. "We'll do a full inventory review, but it won't change the facts. This business is a sinking ship, and the smart move is to sell before it drags us all down." I spent the next 6 hours going through documents, inspecting, inventory, and questioning every decision they'd made since our parents' deaths. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. They hadn't just been preparing to sell, they'd been systematically undervaluing assets, redirecting potential buyers away from higher offers, and positioning themselves to control the proceeds. By late afternoon, we were all exhausted and irritable. Rebecca had stepped out twice for urgent calls that sounded suspiciously like conversations with real estate agents. Daniel had grown increasingly defensive with each question I asked. "Enough," he finally snapped when I questioned a particularly suspicious transfer of assets to a holding company I'd never heard of. "You come back after years away and think, you can just take over? Question every decision we've made while you were off playing humanitarian?" Playing humanitarian? The words stung more than they should have. "I was building schools, Daniel. Creating safe homes for families displaced by civil war. That's not playing. It's work that matters." "And this didn't matter?" He gestured around us. "Dad's legacy, Mom's final years, did you even call her? Weekly like you promised when you left?" The accusation hit its mark. There had been weeks when the satellite connection failed, when emergencies kept me working around the clock, when I'd sent brief texts instead of making the calls I'd promised. "Don't deflect," I said, pushing past the guilt. "This isn't about my work. It's about you and Rebecca trying to cut me out of decisions that affect all of us." Rebecca returned, catching the end of my statement. "That's not fair, Emily. We tried to contact you. You were always too busy, always had some crisis to manage. So that justified lying to me, to Mom's attorney, creating fake documents with my signature?" Daniel at least had the grace to look uncomfortable at that. "We never forged your signature. We just indicated you had given verbal approval." "Which is fraud," I pointed out. "Do you think Mom and Dad would be proud of that? Of how quickly you were willing to toss aside their wishes and my rights to get what you wanted?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, always her defense mechanism when confronted. "You don't understand the pressure we've been under. The business failing, the house needing repairs, all while grieving and trying to handle everything without burdening you. Stop pretending this was for my benefit," I said, fatigue making my voice sharp. If you really didn't want to burden me, you wouldn't have deposited a pittance in my account and considered it settled. I gathered the papers I'd been reviewing. I'm taking these to review properly. Tomorrow we're going to the house. I want to see exactly what's been removed, sold, or conveniently allocated to your homes. You can't just, Daniel began. I can and I will, I cut him off. Unless you'd prefer I go straight to the district attorney with evidence of attempted fraud. I'm sure they'd be very interested in those documents with my verbal approval. The threat hung in the air between us. It was a nuclear option, one that would tear apart whatever remained of our family. But they needed to understand I wasn't the pushover they'd assumed I'd be. Daniel's phone rang, breaking the standoff. He glanced at the screen, then back at me. I need to take this. We'll continue tomorrow. I nodded stiffly, gathering my things as he stepped out to answer the call. Rebecca remained, fidgeting with her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had since high school. She said softly, it wasn't supposed to be like this. No, I agreed. It wasn't. Mom and Dad raised us better. She looked up, eyes still wet. Are you really staying? For how long? As long as it takes to set things right. And your work in Myanmar? The question prompted a pang of guilt. I'd left Jason in charge of projects that had taken months to establish communities that were counting on our support. Some things are more important, I said, echoing the words Mom had used when she insisted on coming to my college graduation, despite Dad's important business meeting that same day. Rebecca nodded slowly. The house tomorrow, then, 10 a.m. I left without another word, driving through Portland's familiar streets in a daze. The city had changed in subtle ways during my absence. New buildings rising in once empty lots. Familiar storefronts replaced by trendy boutiques. Or maybe I was the one who had changed, seeing my hometown through eyes that had witnessed both the worst and best of humanity in distant corners of the world. On impulse, I drove past our family, home, slowing as the Victorian came into view. The blue paint was peeling in places, the garden overgrown with weeds. A for sale sign stood in the front yard, the word pending slashed across it in bold red letters. I parked across the street, staring at the house where I'd grown up, where Dad had taught me to ride a bike in the driveway, where Mom had nursed me through chickenpox in the upstairs bedroom, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays with the kind of love I'd been searching for in my work around the world. They were selling it, without consulting me, without honoring the memories it held. I was still sitting there, lost in thought, when a text from an unknown number buzzed on my phone. Are you parked outside the house? It's Uncle Robert. I'm inside. I looked up sharply. Dad's brother, the uncle who'd always been more interested in art than business, who'd traveled the world collecting stories and artifacts while Dad built the family import company. What was he doing here? Coming, I texted back, stepping out of the car. The front door opened before I reached it, revealing Uncle Robert, older than I remembered, hair now fully silver, but with the same kind eyes that had always seen more than they revealed. Emily, he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of pipe tobacco and Earl Grey tea. I thought that might be you sitting out there. I returned the embrace, surprised by the emotion that welled up at this unexpected connection to my parents. Uncle Robert, I didn't know you were in Portland. He stepped back, studying my face. Came as soon as I heard about Margaret's letter being found. Mark Sullivan called me yesterday. I followed him inside, struck by how empty the house felt. Furniture remained, but the personal touches were gone. Mom's collection of jade figurines that had once lined the mantel. Dad's leather armchair where he'd read the newspaper every Sunday. The family photos that had climbed the staircase. Wall. They've been busy, Uncle Robert said, noting my gaze. Selling, dividing, acting as if they're the only ones with claims to Thomas and Margaret's things. You knew? I asked, following him into the kitchen. Still intact, but lacking the warmth it once held. He put a kettle on the stove, a gesture so reminiscent of Mom that my throat tightened. I suspected, your siblings have always had a talent for rewriting reality to suit their needs. The blunt assessment startled a laugh from me. That's putting it mildly. Uncle Robert pulled 2 mugs from a cabinet. Your mother worried about this, you know. In her final months, she talked about it often. Her fear that Daniel and Rebecca would try to control everything, that you'd be pushed aside. Why didn't she tell me? Would you have left your work if she had? Abandoned those who needed you to come fight over material possessions? The question hung between us as the kettle began to whistle. He was right, of course. I wouldn't have come back, not even for this. The needs in Myanmar had always felt more urgent, more meaningful than family squabbles over inheritance. She was proud of you, Uncle Robert continued, pouring hot water over tea bags. Prouder than you know. But she understood that your path would make you vulnerable in this particular arena. He handed me a mug, then gestured toward the back door. Come, there's something you need to see. I followed him through the kitchen to the small garden house at the back of the property, Mom's sanctuary, where she'd cataloged her antiques and written her memoirs. It had always been off limits to us children unless specifically invited. Uncle Robert produced a key from his pocket. Your mother gave me this the last time I visited. Said if anything happened to her, I should make sure you saw what was inside. The garden house was untouched, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light that streamed through the windows. Mom's desk exactly as she must have left it, papers organized in neat stacks, her reading glasses folded beside them. They haven't been in here, I realized aloud. They couldn't, Uncle Robert said simply. Margaret changed the locks after your father died. Only she and I had keys. He crossed to a cabinet in the corner, unlocking it with another key from his ring. Inside were stacks of leather-bound journals, photo albums, and a small safe. Your mother's private collection, he explained. The things that mattered most to her, that told the true story of your family. He removed a journal dated 2 years earlier and handed it to me. Start here. It will help you understand what you're really fighting for. The journal was filled with Mom's elegant handwriting, reflections on Dad's final months, her concerns about Daniel's management of the business, her observations of Rebecca's growing materialism, and page after page about me, pride in my work, worry for my safety, and a deep understanding that I had inherited not just her compassion but Dad's business acumen, though I'd applied it differently. She knew them, I whispered, looking up at Uncle Robert. She saw exactly who they were becoming. He nodded, face solemn. And who you were becoming too. That's why she made the arrangements she did. The letter? That was just the beginning. The letter was meant to bring you all together, to give you a chance to honor her wishes willingly. He gestured to the safe. This contains her contingency plan. What do you mean? Your mother was many things, Emily. Naive wasn't one of them. He entered a combination into the safe and swung the door open. She knew Daniel and Rebecca might try exactly what they've done. She prepared for it. Inside the safe was a sealed legal document and a USB drive. The document's title made, My Breath Catch, Secondary Will and Trust Provisions, to be executed only in case of dishonesty or dispute. Is this legal? I asked, hands trembling as I lifted the document. Entirely. Mark Sullivan helped her prepare it, though only I knew of its existence until now. He took the papers gently from my hands. It stipulates that if her initial wishes, equal division and mutual decision-making, were ignored, a secondary plan would take effect. What secondary plan? Control of the business would pass to you alone, with Daniel and Rebecca receiving only minority interests. The house would be placed in a trust, not to be sold for 10 years, and her personal collections, He smiled slightly. Those she divided with great care, knowing exactly which pieces each of you would truly value versus which you would simply sell. I sank into Mom's desk chair, overwhelmed. She thought of everything. She knew her children, all of them. Uncle Robert placed a hand on my shoulder. The question now is, what will you do with this information? It was a fair question. I could walk into tomorrow's meeting with these documents in hand, effectively taking control of everything and reducing my siblings to powerless bystanders. It would be justified after what they'd tried to do. It might even be what Mom had expected would happen. But as I looked around the garden house, this sanctuary of memories and thoughtfulness, I wondered if that's what she would have wanted. Not just the letter of her contingency plan, but its spirit. I need to think, I said finally. Uncle Robert nodded. You have until tomorrow. The documents are here when you need them. He placed the key to the garden house in my palm, closing my fingers around it. Your mother trusted you with her legacy, Emily. Not just the things, but the values they represent. We left the garden house, locking it behind us. As we walked back through the empty kitchen, I tried to imagine what would happen to this house with strangers living in it. No memory of Mom's Sunday dinners or Dad's birthday celebrations. No knowledge of the history contained within these walls. Will you come tomorrow? I asked Uncle Robert as we reached the front door. When I meet with Daniel and Rebecca. He shook his head. This is between you three now. But I'm staying at the Heathman if you need me. He squeezed my hand. Your mother believed you would make the right choice, whatever that turns out to be. After he left, I wandered through the house alone, touching door frames and banisters, remembering. Upstairs, my childhood bedroom had been stripped of personal items, but the pale blue walls remained, the window seat where I'd read books and dreamed of changing the world still intact. I sat there now, watching the sun begin to set over the neighborhood, trying to reconcile the various versions of my family that existed in my mind. The loving, supportive parents, the competitive, sometimes cruel siblings, the wealth that had allowed me the freedom to pursue humanitarian work while simultaneously creating the discord now threatening to tear us apart. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Dinner tonight? You can't hide in that hotel forever. I smiled despite myself. Actually, I'm at the house. Meet me here instead? 20 minutes later, Olivia's car pulled up outside. She'd been my best friend since freshman year of college, the one constant connection to Portland during my years abroad. She'd visited Mom weekly during her final months, something I couldn't do from Myanmar, a fact that had gnawed at me during sleepless nights. She entered without knocking, a bottle of wine in each hand. Thought we might need reinforcements. I hugged her tightly, suddenly grateful for this uncomplicated relationship in the midst of so much family complexity. So, she said, looking around the half-empty living room, this is worse than I imagined. You haven't seen the spreadsheets, I replied dryly, leading her to the kitchen where I hunted for wine glasses among the remaining dishes. Over wine and takeout ordered from our favorite Thai place, I told her everything. The confrontation at the warehouse, the suspicious financial documents, Uncle Robert's appearance, and the revelation of Mom's contingency plan. Your mother was a badass, Olivia declared, raising her glass in tribute. Always liked her. I smiled, remembering Mom's fondness for Olivia, how she'd always set an extra place at holiday dinners, just in case Olivia could join us. She liked you too. So, what are you going to do? Hit them with the secret will tomorrow? I'd pay good, money to see Daniel's face. I swirled the wine in my glass, considering. That's the nuclear option. Once I go there, there's no coming back. Whatever's left of our family would be destroyed. They were willing to destroy it when they tried. To cheat you, Olivia pointed out. True. I sighed. But maybe that's the difference between us. Maybe I'm not willing to sink to their level. Then what's the alternative? Let them get away with it? The question hung between us as I stared out the kitchen window at the garden house, barely visible in the gathering darkness. Inside was the power to take control, to punish my siblings for their betrayal. But was that really what Mom had intended? Or was the contingency plan meant as leverage, a way to bring us back to her original wish, that we work together, that we honor our shared legacy? What if? I began slowly, an idea taking shape. What if I used the contingency plan as a negotiating tool? Not to take everything, but to force them back to the table? To make them honor Mom's original wishes? Olivia considered this, head tilted. Could work, but they'd have to believe you're willing to use it. Oh, I am, I said, a new resolve, hardening in my voice. They've shown who they are. Now it's time for me to show who I am. Not just the peacemaker, not just the idealist they think they can push around. Someone who will fight for what's right. And what is right in this case? Olivia asked softly. I thought about Mom's letter, about her journals, about the care she'd taken to preserve not just things but values. Honoring what Mom and Dad built, making decisions together, even when it's hard. Preserving the things that matter, not just for their monetary value, but for what they represent. And if Daniel and Rebecca don't agree, then I'll have to make the hard choice. I drained my wine glass, setting it down with finality. But first, I'm going to give them one more chance. To be the siblings I know they can be. The ones Mom and Dad raised us to be. Olivia stayed late into the night, helping me go through the remaining items in the house, cataloging what was missing, what had been taken without consultation. The process was both painful and clarifying. Seeing the empty spaces where family, treasures had once stood, recognizing which items each sibling had claimed for themselves. By midnight, I had a clear picture of what had happened in my absence. Daniel had taken Dad's rare coin collection, his vintage watches, the first dollar bill ever earned at Chen Family Imports. Rebecca had claimed Mom's jewelry, the antique, silver tea set from our grandmother, the hand-painted silk screens that had hung in the dining room. They'd taken the things that could be easily sold or displayed as status symbols. What remained were family photos, albums, books, the documentation of our shared history, the items of purely sentimental value. After Olivia left, I sat alone, in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of furnishings past, formulating my plan for tomorrow's confrontation. This wasn't just about money or possessions anymore. It was about truth, about integrity, about honoring the people who had given us everything. I slept in my childhood bedroom that night, the emptiness of the house a stark reminder of all that had changed. In the morning, I rose early, made coffee in the half-emptied kitchen, and sat in the garden house reading more of Mom's journals, strengthening my resolve with her words, her insights, her hopes for her children. By the time Daniel's car pulled into the driveway at 10 a.m., followed shortly by Rebecca's, I was ready. The contingency will was tucked into my bag, along with selected passages from Mom's journals that spoke directly to her fears about exactly the scenario that had unfolded. They entered the house cautiously, as if uncertain of their welcome in a place that had once been our shared home, but was now contested territory. "You spent the night here?" Daniel asked, noting my coffee mug on the kitchen counter. "Seemed appropriate," I replied. "Gave me time to see exactly what's been removed without my knowledge or consent." Rebecca at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Emily, we were going to discuss the personal items? When? After they were already distributed? After you'd taken everything of value?" I gestured around us. "Walk through this house and tell me you've acted with honor. Tell me you've respected Mom and Dad's memory." Daniel's jaw tightened. "We did what was necessary. The house is being sold. Things needed to be cleared out. Without my input, without my consent, against Mom's explicit wishes in her letter." "You weren't here," Rebecca said, the familiar refrain that had justified every exclusion. "I'm here now," I replied, "and I'm not going anywhere until this is settled properly." I led them to the dining room, where I'd spread out my notes, the inventory of missing items, and the financial documents I'd taken from the warehouse. But I kept the contingency will hidden for now, the ace up my sleeve. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady with newfound confidence. "We're going to start over. Everything that's been taken from this house will be brought back and divided according to Mom's itemized wishes. The business will not be sold until we've had a proper valuation from an independent appraiser. And the house..." I paused, looking around at the walls that had sheltered our childhood. "The house sale will be put on hold until we've had time to consider alternatives." Daniel laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "That's not happening, Emily. Contracts have been signed, deposits taken." "Illegally," I pointed out. "Without my required signature. I've spoken with Mark Sullivan. I know exactly what rights I have. And we know exactly how long you're willing to stay in Portland," Rebecca countered. "Your precious work in Myanmar will call you back soon enough. Then we'll be right back where we started." The certainty in her voice, the absolute conviction that my commitment to others made me weak in this context, fueled my determination. "You're wrong," I said simply, "about so many things, but especially about my resolve." I reached into my bag, withdrawing Mom's contingency will. "This might help you understand just how serious I am." I placed the document on the table between us. Daniel frowned, reaching for it, scanning the title with growing alarm. "What is this?" he demanded. "Mom's backup plan," I explained. "The one she created in case you two tried exactly what you've been doing." Rebecca leaned over his shoulder, face paling as she read. "This can't be legal." "It's entirely legal. Created with Mark Sullivan's help, witnessed appropriately, filed with the courts but sealed until needed." I leaned forward. "Mom knew you might try to push me out. She prepared for it." The shock on their faces might have been satisfying under different circumstances. Now it just felt sad. Confirmation that our mother had seen their potential for betrayal clearly enough to guard against it. "If this is executed," I continued, "control of the business passes to me. The house goes into a trust for 10 years, and Mom's collections are divided according to her specific instructions, not your convenience." Daniel's face flushed with anger. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I? After what you've tried to do?" I met his gaze steadily. "Mom gave me this protection for a reason. She trusted me to use it if necessary." "So that's it?" Rebecca's voice trembled. "You're taking everything? Proving you're just as greedy as you claim we are?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm giving you a choice. We can do this one of two ways. Either I file this contingency will and take control as Mom designated." I paused, letting the threat sink in. "Or we can go back to her original wishes. Equal. Division. Unanimous decisions. Family acting like family." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of choices. Theirs past, mine present, all of ours future. "Why would we trust you now?" Daniel finally asked, his voice oddly subdued. "Because unlike you, I haven't lied. I haven't schemed. I haven't tried to take what isn't rightfully mine." I spread my hands. "And because Mom and Dad raised us better than this. All of us. We can't undo contracts that are already signed," Rebecca said, but the defiance had leached from her voice. "We can try. Together." I looked between them, searching for the siblings I remembered. The ones who had built snow forts with me in the backyard, who had cheered at my college graduation, who had stood beside me at our parents' funerals. We can honor Mom and Dad's legacy the way they intended. Not just the possessions, but the values. Daniel stared at the contingency will, then at me. The calculations were visible behind his eyes, weighing the cost of fighting me, the potential loss of control, the public embarrassment if this became a legal battle. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked finally. I outlined my terms. Return of all removed items, transparent financial accounting, independent appraisals, and mutual decision-making moving forward. No quick sales, no hidden agendas, no shortcuts. "And if we disagree?" Rebecca asked. "If we can't reach unanimous decisions?" "Then we compromise," I said simply, "like adults, like family. And the contingency will." Daniel nodded toward E, the document. "Stays with me. Insurance that will honor this agreement." I held his gaze. "I don't want to use it, Daniel. I want us to find a way forward together. But I will use it if I have to." The three of us sat in silence, the weight of the moment settling around us. This was the crossroads, not just for our inheritance, but for our family. Whatever came next would define us, would honor or dishonor our parents' memory. Finally, Daniel nodded, a small, reluctant movement. "We'll try it your way, for now." It wasn't a wholehearted commitment. It wasn't a guarantee of honesty moving forward. But it was a start, a crack in the wall of deception they'd built, a potential path back to the siblings we had once been to each other. As I looked between them, Daniel with his guarded expression, Rebecca with her uncertain eyes, I realized this was just the beginning of the real work ahead. The foundation building, the slow, painstaking process of reconstructing trust from the rubble of betrayal. "For Mom and Dad," I said softly, extending my hands across the table. After a moment's hesitation, they each took one. "For Mom and Dad," they echoed. Outside, Portland's persistent rain had given way to weak sunshine breaking through clouds. Not a perfect day, but a clearing. A chance for something new to grow from what had been broken. The truce we established that morning in our childhood, home was fragile at best. I could see it in Daniel's tight smile, in Rebecca's nervous glances, in the way they both kept eyeing the contingency will as if it might burst into flames at any moment. We'd agreed to start over, to honor Mom's wishes, but the path forward was unclear, tangled with years of resentment and weeks of deception. "We should make a plan," I said, breaking the uneasy silence that had settled after our handshake. Systematic approach to undoing the damage and moving forward properly." Daniel checked his watch, an automatic gesture that spoke volumes about his priorities. "I have meetings this afternoon. Potential buyers for the business who've already been scheduled." "Cancel them," I said simply. His jaw tightened. "Emily, the real world doesn't stop because you've decided to play prodigal daughter. These are serious people with significant offers. And they can wait until we've had a proper independent appraisal." I held his gaze. "Unless you're afraid a fair valuation will be significantly higher than what you've been discussing?" The flash in his eyes told me I'd hit the mark. Daniel had always been skilled at negotiation. Dad had praised him for it. But I was beginning to suspect he'd been using those skills against his own family's interests. "Fine," he said finally. "I'll reschedule. But this better not take weeks, Emily. The market won't wait forever." "The market has waited for decades," I countered. "Dad built this business to last, not to be liquidated at the first sign of difficulty." Rebecca, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "What do you want us to do about the things we've taken?" I appreciated the hesitation in her voice, the smallest acknowledgement that what they'd done hadn't been right. "Bring everything back," I said. "Tomorrow. We'll go through Mom's itemized list together and divide things properly." "Everything?" Daniel's voice had an edge. "Some items have already been sold." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it still felt like a physical blow. "What have you sold?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Some of Dad's watches. A few pieces from Mom's jade collection. Nothing irreplaceable." I thought of the jade Buddha that had sat on Mom's dresser for as long as I could remember, the one she'd inherited from her grandmother, that was supposed to be passed down through generations. Define irreplaceable. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. The important pieces are safe. We're not monsters, Emily. Then it shouldn't be difficult to bring back what remains and provide an accounting of what's been sold, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., here. They left soon after, Daniel to his mysterious meetings, Rebecca to pick up Zach from school. I remained in the empty house, the weight of what lay ahead settling around me like the dust that had gathered on the remaining furniture. I called Olivia, who arrived an hour later with sandwiches, and determination. So they agreed to your terms? She asked, unwrapping lunch at the kitchen counter. Reluctantly. I'm not sure how much I trust their commitment. She snorted. I wouldn't trust Daniel as far as I could throw him, and Rebecca will follow his lead like she always has. Maybe, I said, thinking of the uncertainty I'd glimpsed in Rebecca's eyes. But they don't have much choice now, not with Mom's contingency plan hanging over their heads. We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Olivia spoke again. What about your work in Myanmar? Have you told them how long you're staying? The question prodded at my own uncertainty. I'd left in such a hurry, promising Jason I'd be back as soon as possible. But the situation here was far more complicated than I'd anticipated. I need to call Jason, I admitted. See how things are going. Figure out a timeline. And if this takes longer than you planned? I thought about the refugee housing project, the families waiting for safe shelter before monsoon season intensified. The work that had given my life purpose when grief threatened to overwhelm me. I don't know, I said honestly. But I can't leave until this is settled properly. I can't give Daniel and Rebecca the opportunity to revert to their original plan the moment my back is turned. Olivia squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think your mom would be proud, not just of you standing up to them, but of trying to rebuild something together. After she left, I drove to the warehouse, wanting to examine the inventory without Daniel's hovering presence. The security guard recognized me. He'd worked for Dad for years, and let me in without question. The warehouse felt different. In the afternoon light, emptier than I remembered, with gaps on shelves where inventory should have been. I walked through the aisles slowly, touching carved statues and silk tapestries, remembering Dad's stories about each acquisition. This had never been just a business to him. Each piece represented a relationship, a connection to artisans and suppliers he'd worked with for decades. In the back office, I found the original inventory logs, handwritten by Dad in the early years, digitized later but still maintained with meticulous care. Comparing them to the current stock revealed the extent of what had been sold since his death. Far more than Daniel had implied, and often at prices well below market value. I was still going through the records when my phone rang, an international number I recognized immediately. Jason, I answered, guilty that I hadn't called him first. Emily. His voice was a mixture of concern and relief. Finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. I'm sorry. Things here are more complicated than I expected. The Yangon project can't move forward without your approval on the revised plans. And the funding meeting is scheduled for next week, the one you were supposed to lead. I closed my eyes, the weight of competing responsibilities pressing down on me. I can review the plans remotely. Send them to me tonight. And the funding. Meeting, can you handle it? You know the proposal as well as I do. His hesitation was telling. I can try, but they're expecting you, Em. Your reputation is what got us in the door. I know, I'm sorry. I rubbed my temples, trying to think clearly. Tell them I had a family emergency. It's the truth. And promise them I'll follow up personally as soon as I return. When will that be? The question I couldn't answer. I don't know yet. Soon, I hope. but I can't leave things unresolved here. After we hung up, I sat in Dad's office chair, staring at the photographs on the wall. Images of him with suppliers in China, Japan, Thailand, the relationships he'd built over decades. This business had been his life's work, the legacy he'd intended to pass on to his children. Not to be dismantled and sold off in pieces, but to be continued, perhaps in a new form, but with the same spirit of connection and quality. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Emily, it's Mark Sullivan. Can you meet tomorrow morning? There are additional documents concerning your mother's estate that require discussion." I frowned at the message. More documents? What hadn't Uncle Robert told me? 8 a.m. at your office? I replied. Perfect. There's much to discuss. I left the warehouse as dusk was settling, driving back to the hotel with more questions than answers. The weight of what I was uncovering, the extent of Daniel and Rebecca's betrayal, the complexity of the business situation, the pressure from my work in Myanmar, left me exhausted and uncertain. That night, I spread Mom's journals across the hotel bed, reading her reflections on the family business, her hopes for its future. One passage in particular caught my attention. Thomas always assumed Daniel would take over, but I'm not convinced. He has the heart for it. He sees the numbers but misses the stories behind each piece. Emily, on the other hand, understands the human connections like Thomas did, though she's chosen to apply that gift elsewhere. I wonder sometimes if she might find her way back, if circumstances aligned differently. Mom had seen something in me that I hadn't recognized in myself, a connection to Dad's approach to business, to his values, to the human relationships, that had made Chen Family Imports more than just a commercial enterprise. I fell asleep with her words echoing in my mind, waking early to meet Mark Sullivan before my scheduled confrontation with Daniel and Rebecca. The attorney's office was quiet at 8 a.m., his receptionist not yet arrived. Mark greeted me himself, looking grave as he ushered me into his office. "Thank you for coming, Emily. Coffee?" I accepted the cup he offered, noting the tension in his movements. "What additional documents did you need to discuss?" He settled behind his desk, removing a thick folder from his drawer. "First, I want to apologize. I wasn't aware of the extent to which Daniel had misrepresented the situation. Had I known, I would have contacted you much sooner." "You couldn't have known," I said, though part of me wondered why he hadn't questioned Daniel's claims more thoroughly. "Nevertheless," he adjusted his glasses, "your Uncle Robert informed me that he's shared Margaret's contingency documents with you. What you may not know is that there's more to her plan than just the revised will." He spread several papers before me, financial statements, trust documents, and a handwritten letter I hadn't seen before. "Your mother established a separate trust 6 months before her death, one that Daniel and Rebecca know nothing about." I leaned forward, examining the documents with growing surprise. "What kind of trust?" "A charitable foundation, primarily. The Emily Chen Humanitarian Fund." The name stopped me short. "What?" Mark's expression softened. "Margaret was immensely proud of your work, Emily. This was her way of supporting it beyond her lifetime. The trust contains approximately $7 million. Funds she transferred from her personal accounts, separate from the family business or other assets Daniel might have been monitoring." I stared at the documents, stunned by this revelation. Mom had created a foundation, in my name, dedicated to the work I'd chosen over the family business. Work that Daniel and Rebecca had always dismissed as idealistic and impractical. "The trust has strict parameters," Mark continued. "The funds can only be used for humanitarian projects you directly oversee. There are provisions for administrative costs, for expansion, even for your personal salary should you choose to dedicate yourself to the foundation full-time." "She never said anything," I whispered, tracing my name on the document with trembling fingers. "She wanted it to be a surprise, something you would discover when the time was right." Mark hesitated. There's more. The trust includes provisions related to the family business. What provisions? If Chen Family Imports were to establish a charitable division, one that partnered with artisans in developing countries to create sustainable business opportunities, the trust would invest significantly in that division. The pieces clicked into place with startling clarity. Mom hadn't just been supporting my chosen path. She'd been creating a bridge between my work and the family legacy, a way to honor both. Does this change how you want to approach the situation with your siblings? Mark asked quietly. It changed everything, and nothing. The trust was a profound gift, a validation of choices I'd sometimes doubted in my darkest moments. But it didn't erase the betrayal, didn't solve the immediate problems of Daniel and Rebecca's deception. I still want them to honor Mom's original wishes, I said finally. To make decisions together, to divide things fairly. But this, I touched the trust documents. This gives me options I didn't have before. Mark nodded, understanding what I wasn't explicitly stating. The trust meant I no longer needed to fight for my share of the inheritance out of financial necessity. I could make decisions based on principle, on what would best honor Mom and Dad's legacy. I'll have copies made of everything for you to take, he said. And Emily, your mother was a remarkable woman. She saw possibilities that others missed. I left his office with a heavy folder and a lighter heart, driving to the family home with new clarity about the path forward. The trust didn't erase the hurt of my siblings' actions, but it provided a foundation I could build upon, literally and figuratively. Daniel's car was already in the driveway when I arrived, alongside a small moving truck that suggested he'd taken my demand to return items seriously. Rebecca pulled up as I was walking to the door, her SUV loaded with boxes. "You're actually doing it," I commented as she struggled to lift a large container. "You didn't give us much choice," she replied, but without the bitterness I'd expected. "Can you help with this one? It's Mom's china." We worked together silently, unloading her vehicle and carrying boxes into the house. Daniel emerged from inside, nodding stiffly in greeting. "Most of what I took is already in the dining room," he said. "The moving truck has the larger furniture pieces." I acknowledged this with a nod, surprised by their compliance but not yet ready to trust it completely. Once everything's inside, we'll go through Mom's lists together. The process took hours. Unloading, unpacking, cataloging. The house, slowly refilled with the treasures that had been dispersed, each item a piece of our shared history returning to its rightful place until decisions could be made properly. Some things were indeed missing, sold, as Daniel had admitted. He provided receipts, the amounts confirming my suspicion that items had been undervalued and sold quickly. But the most significant pieces had been retained, including Mom's jade collection and Dad's rare coins. By late afternoon, we sat exhausted around the dining room table, surrounded by the physical manifestation of our family legacy. Mom's itemized lists lay between us, her careful notes about which child should receive which treasures, the reasons for her choices often explained in personal annotations. "She put a lot of thought into this," Rebecca said softly, reading a note about why she should receive grandmother's pearl necklace. Rebecca wore these to her high school graduation. She's always loved them, and they suit her classic style. That's what makes all of this so, I searched for the right word, unnecessary. Mom had already decided how to divide things fairly. If you'd just followed her wishes from the beginning. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. We thought we knew better. The admission, small but significant, hung in the air between us. "The business is the bigger issue," I said after a moment. "The undervalued appraisals, the rushed sale attempts." Daniel's expression hardened. "The business is failing, Emily. Whatever you think you've discovered in the warehouse records doesn't change that reality." Maybe it's failing because you're trying to run it exactly as Dad did, in a market that's changed, I suggested. Or maybe it's failing because you've been focused on liquidating it rather than revitalizing it. And you have a better idea? From your extensive business experience in refugee camps? The sarcasm in his voice was familiar. The older brother, dismissing the younger sister's input. I thought about what Mark Sullivan had shown me that morning, about Mom's vision for bridging my work with the family business. Actually, I do have ideas, I said. But first, I want an independent appraisal and a complete financial audit. Before we make any decisions about selling or keeping the business, we need accurate information. Rebecca looked between us, her allegiance visibly wavering. That seems reasonable, Daniel. We should have all the facts before deciding. His jaw worked as he considered, likely weighing the contingency will's threat against his desire to maintain control. Fine. An independent appraisal. But while that's happening, we should still be entertaining offers, just to understand the market. It was a compromise of sorts. Not ideal, but progress. Agreed, as long as all three of us are present for any discussions with potential buyers. We established a timeline, 2 weeks for the appraisal and audit, during which we would also work through the personal items according to Mom's wishes. No sales would be finalized without unanimous agreement. What about the house? Rebecca asked, glancing around at the home that had sheltered our childhoods. The sale is pending. The buyers are expecting to close next month. I'd been considering this since discovering Mom's trust. I'd like to explore alternatives to selling, maybe converting it to a duplex or using it as headquarters for a new venture. Daniel scoffed. That's not practical. The maintenance alone. Let's at least consider it, I interrupted. There may be options we haven't thought of. Rebecca surprised me by nodding. I've always hated the idea of strangers living here. If there's a way to keep it in the family somehow. Daniel looked between us, outnumbered. We can discuss it, but the pending sale is a factor we can't ignore. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the windows that had framed so many family dinners, we reached a tentative accord. Not perfect agreement, but a framework for moving forward that honored Mom's wishes while acknowledging current realities. I watched my siblings gathering their things to leave, struck by how different they seemed from just 2 days ago. Daniel less rigid, Rebecca more thoughtful. Whether the change was genuine or merely strategic remained to be seen. But it was a beginning. Same time tomorrow? I asked as they headed for the door. We can start sorting through the personal items properly. They nodded, a synchronized motion that reminded me of childhood moments when the three of us had moved as a unit despite our differences. Emily, Daniel said, pausing at the threshold. Are you staying here tonight? The question caught me off guard. I was planning to go back to the hotel. He glanced around the house, now refilled with much of what had been removed. You could stay here. It is still your home too. The offer, small but significant, felt like an olive branch. Maybe I will. After they left, I wandered through the house alone, touching familiar objects, remembering. The dining room table where we'd celebrated birthdays, the living room sofa where Dad had read us stories, the kitchen where Mom had taught each of us to cook our favorite dishes. This house wasn't just a property to be sold. It was the physical manifestation of our family history, the container of memories both painful and precious. Losing it would mean losing a part of ourselves, a connection to who we had been, and perhaps, who we might become again. My phone buzzed, with a text from Jason in Myanmar. Revised plans attached. Need your feedback ASAP. Team asking daily when you're returning. The dueling responsibilities pulled at me. The urgent needs in Myanmar, the complex situation in Portland. Both required my full attention. Both mattered deeply. I called Jason, the time difference meaning he was just starting his workday. "I got your message," I said when he answered. "I'll review the plans tonight and send feedback by morning your time." "That helps," he said, relief evident in his voice. "But Emily, the team needs more than just your feedback. They need leadership. Direction, the kind only you can provide." The weight of his words settled around me. "I know, and I'm trying to figure out how to be in two places at once." "Not possible, even for the mighty Emily Chen," he said, the gentle teasing in his voice achingly familiar. "You need to make a choice." After we hung up, I sat on the window seat in my childhood bedroom, the same spot where I'd dreamed of changing the world, where I'd mapped out plans for escaping Portland and making a difference globally. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd achieved those dreams, only to be pulled back to the very place I'd been so eager to leave. My phone buzzed again, Olivia this time. "How's it going with the Terrible 2? Need backup?" I smiled, despite my exhaustion. Surprisingly civilized. They actually brought everything back. Miracle of miracles. Dinner later to celebrate this minor victory? I glanced at the plans Jason had sent, knowing they required hours of careful review. Rain check? Work from Myanmar needs attention. The Emily Chen balancing act continues. Call if you need anything. I spent the evening at the dining room table, reviewing housing designs for villages I'd visited months ago, families whose faces I could still picture clearly. The work mattered. These weren't abstract concepts, but real people waiting for safe shelter before monsoon season intensified. Yet as I annotated blueprints and budgets, my mind kept returning to the conversation with Mark Sullivan that morning. The Emily Chen Humanitarian Fund. Mom's vision of connecting my work with the family business, a bridge between worlds I'd always seen as separate. What if they didn't have to be separate? What if there was a way to honor both paths? I was still pondering this question when my phone rang. Uncle Robert calling from his hotel. I hear, "The meeting went better than expected," he said when I answered. "You've been talking to Mark Sullivan." "I have. He told me about Margaret's trust." I moved to the living room, settling into the only armchair that remained, Dad's favorite, the one Daniel had apparently chosen not to take. "Why didn't you tell me about it yesterday?" "Margaret was very specific about the sequence of revelations," he explained. "She wanted you to stand up to your siblings on principle first, without the financial security the trust provides, to make choices based on what's right, not what's convenient." My mother, orchestrating events even from beyond, understanding her children's strengths and weaknesses with painful clarity. "It changes things," I admitted, knowing I have options beyond what Daniel and Rebecca decide. "That was precisely Margaret's intention," Uncle Robert said. "Freedom to make choices aligned with your values, not constrained by financial necessity." After we hung up, I returned to the Myanmar plans, working late into the night until my eyes grew heavy. I fell asleep on the living room sofa, surrounded by the ghosts of my parents and the possibilities of a future not yet determined. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through windows I had forgotten faced east. I woke disoriented, momentarily unsure where I was until the familiar ceiling came into focus. The slight water stain from when the roof had leaked during a particularly brutal winter storm. The crown molding Dad had installed himself despite Mom's insistence they hire professionals. I sent my annotated plans to Jason with detailed notes, then prepared for another day of negotiations with my siblings. The foundation had been laid, items returned, a framework for moving forward established, but the real work of rebuilding, trust had barely begun. Daniel arrived first, earlier than our agreed time, carrying coffee and pastries from the bakery Mom had frequented every Sunday. "Peace offering," he said, handing me a cup. "I remembered how you take it. Black with 1, sugar." The gesture was small but unexpected, evidence that beneath the businessman exterior, my brother still remembered details about the sister he'd tried to cut out of her inheritance. "Thanks," I said, accepting both the coffee and the tentative olive branch it represented. I was up late reviewing project plans from Myanmar. He nodded, hesitating before asking, "How's the work going there? Rebecca mentioned you're building housing?" The question seemed genuine. Perhaps the first time he'd expressed interest in my career beyond dismissive comments about playing humanitarian. "Refugee housing, yes. Families displaced by conflict, trying to rebuild before monsoon season hits full force." Sounds challenging. It is, but meaningful. I studied him over the rim of my coffee cup. Not unlike what Dad did, in a way. Creating something that helps people, that makes their lives better. His eyebrows rose slightly. I never thought of the connection. Neither did I, until recently. I gestured toward the dining room. "Shall we get started on Mom's lists while we wait for Rebecca?" We worked in surprisingly companionable silence, separating items according to Mom's detailed instructions. There were occasional disagreements, a jade figure that wasn't explicitly assigned, photographs that held different significance for each of us. But nothing like the battlefield I had anticipated. Rebecca arrived an hour later, apologetic about school drop-off complications with Zach. She joined our methodical sorting, occasionally sharing memories triggered by particular items. "Remember when Dad brought this back from his first trip? To Bangkok? Mom was so mad he'd spent so much on it." The stories flowed more freely as the morning progressed. Moments from our shared history that had been overshadowed by recent conflicts but not erased. For the first time since returning to Portland, I glimpsed the siblings I remembered, the family we had once been. By noon, we had worked through nearly all of Mom's personal collections. The process had been surprisingly healing, her thoughtful notes explaining why each item should go to a particular child, often revealing how well she had known and loved each of us, how carefully she had observed our individual connections to family treasures. "She thought of everything," Rebecca said, reading a note attached to a small watercolor painting. "For Emily, who always stopped to look at this when she passed through the hallway. It reminded her of the river where we had picnics in summer." I had forgotten that habit, the way I'd paused to study that painting during busy mornings rushing to school. Mom had noticed, had remembered, had ensured the painting would come to me even if I wasn't present to claim it. "She did," I agreed, "which makes it all the more important that we honor her wishes completely." Daniel nodded, a genuine agreement rather than the reluctant compliance of yesterday. "The house is next, and the business. The house first," I suggested. "It's the more immediate issue with the pending sale." Rebecca frowned. "You mentioned alternatives yesterday. Do you have specific ideas?" I did. Ideas that had crystallized during the night, shaped by the discovery of Mom's trust and her vision for connecting my work with the family legacy. "What if," I began carefully, "we converted part of the house into headquarters for a new venture? A charitable division of Chen Family Imports focused on sustainable partnerships with artisans in regions like Myanmar?" Daniel's brow furrowed. "A charity division? That's not exactly a profit-generating strategy." "Not primarily, no, but it could be structured as a social enterprise, with both nonprofit and for-profit elements." I outlined the concept that had been forming in my mind, using the family business's existing infrastructure and connections to create opportunities for artisans in developing regions, selling their work through Chen Family Imports' established channels. The main business would continue its traditional imports, I explained, while this new division would focus on areas with humanitarian needs, creating sustainable livelihoods alongside the aid work already happening there. Rebecca looked intrigued. "Like fair trade, but more direct?" "Exactly. Direct partnerships, fair compensation, sustainable practices. We'd be continuing Dad's legacy of building relationships while expanding it in directions he might not have considered." Daniel remained skeptical. The business is already struggling. Adding a charitable component could drain resources further. Or it could revitalize the brand, I countered. Consumers increasingly want products with ethical sourcing, with stories of positive impact. We'd be leveraging what Dad built while evolving for today's market. I didn't mention Mom's trust yet, the financial backing that could make this vision viable even if the existing business struggled initially. That revelation needed the right moment, when Daniel and Rebecca had demonstrated genuine commitment to moving forward together. "It's worth considering," Rebecca said, surprising me with her support. "The business needs new direction anyway. This could distinguish us from competitors." Daniel's expression remained guarded, but I could see him calculating, assessing the business potential beneath the charitable packaging. "The house? Convert the main floor into offices and meeting space," I suggested. "The upper floor could remain living quarters, for visiting artisans, for me when I'm stateside coordinating between regions, maybe even for family use." "What about the money?" Daniel asked bluntly. "The sale of the house would provide capital for all three of us. Your plan keeps assets tied up indefinitely." "There are options," I said carefully. "Investment structures that would provide returns while keeping the property in family hands, and potential funding sources I'm exploring." Rebecca leaned forward. "I like the idea of keeping the house, finding a new purpose for it that honors Mom and Dad's legacy while looking forward." Daniel looked between us, outnumbered again. "I'm not saying no," he said finally. "But I need to see detailed financials, business projections, concrete numbers before agreeing to anything." "Of course," I agreed. "That's only reasonable." As they prepared to leave, Daniel to the warehouse for a scheduled meeting with the appraiser Rebecca to pick up Zach, I felt a shift in our dynamics. Not complete resolution, not perfect trust restored, but movement in the right direction. The foundation strengthening beneath us. "Emily," Rebecca said as she gathered her purse, "there's a dinner at Zach's school tomorrow night. He's receiving an award. He'd like to see his aunt, if you're free." The invitation, casual but significant, caught me off guard. "I'd love to come." Daniel hovered at the door, watching this exchange. "And afterward, perhaps we could discuss your business proposal more concretely, if you have time." 2 invitations in as many minutes. My siblings reaching out, creating space for me in their lives after months of exclusion. "I have time," I said, and meant it. After they left, I sat alone in the house that now felt more like home than it had when I first arrived. The anger that had driven me from Myanmar to Portland had transformed into something more complex. Determination, still, but tempered with hope, with possibility, with the first fragile threads of rebuilding. My phone buzzed with a message from Jason. "Team loved your revisions. When can we discuss implementation timeline?" The parallel responsibilities still pulled at me, the lives in Myanmar still waiting for solutions I'd promised to deliver. But for the first time, I could envision a future where these worlds weren't in competition, but in conversation. The humanitarian work that had given my life purpose aligned with the family legacy I'd been so eager to escape. I texted back. "Schedule a video call for tomorrow morning. I have ideas to discuss." Then I opened my laptop and began sketching the outline of a business plan, a bridge between worlds, a legacy reimagined. The ascension from foundation to something new, something that honored all that had come before while creating space for what might come next. The Myanmar heat hit me like a physical force as I stepped off the plane 3 weeks after leaving Portland. Despite growing up in the Pacific Northwest, my body had adapted to Southeast Asia's climate during my years of work here. Now, it felt like returning to a second home. Familiar, challenging, essential to who I'd become. Jason waited at arrivals, his tired smile reflecting the intensity of managing projects without me. "Welcome back, stranger. Only took 3 urgent crises to get you here." I laughed, dropping my bag to hug him properly. "Missed you too. How bad is it really?" "Manageable." He grabbed my suitcase, leading me toward the waiting Jeep. The housing in the eastern sector is on schedule. Funding secured for the next phase. Team holding together. But everyone's curious about this new business direction you've been emailing about. The drive to our headquarters gave me time to reacclimate. The chaotic traffic, roadside vendors, the particular quality of light that made Myanmar distinct from anywhere else I'd worked. Jason filled me in on operational details, the small crises and triumphs that constituted daily humanitarian work. "You're different," he observed as we neared the compound. "More settled somehow. Did finding out your siblings tried to steal your inheritance actually improve your mood?" I smiled at his characteristic bluntness. "Not exactly, but resolving it has brought unexpected clarity. About family, about what I'm building here, about integration rather than separation." The next 2 weeks passed in whirlwind activity, community, meetings with potential artisan partners, housing project inspections, team discussions about expanding our mission. The business plan developed with my siblings in Portland took tangible shape as I met with women's weaving collectives, wood carvers, and sustainable material suppliers. Our community liaison, proved invaluable in these discussions, translating not just language but cultural nuances as we explored partnership possibilities. "They are cautious," she explained after one particularly reserved meeting. "Many organizations have promised fair trade, then disappeared or changed terms once production began." "We'll need to demonstrate long-term commitment," I acknowledged. "Starting with transparent contracts, advance payments for materials, training support. And your family business, it will truly purchase directly? No middlemen taking profits?" "Direct partnership," I confirmed. "That's the foundation of our model. Sustainable relationships, not just transactions." The genuine excitement that emerged once communities understood the potential was validating, not just for the business model, but for Mom's vision of integration. The artisans showed me generations-old techniques, traditional patterns being adapted for contemporary markets, the pride in craftsmanship that transcended economic necessity. Each evening, I video-called Portland, sometimes Daniel at the warehouse reviewing client reactions to our planned transition, sometimes Rebecca discussing house renovation concepts, occasionally Zach popping into frame with enthusiastic updates about soccer tournaments and science projects. The first catalog designs came back, Daniel shared during our final planning call. Combining traditional import products with the artisan partnership lines, the designers created exactly what we discussed: storytelling alongside product details, transparency about sourcing and impact. "Send me the PDF," I requested. "I'll share it with the Weaving Collective tomorrow. Seeing their work presented professionally will mean everything." These daily connections bridged worlds I'd previously kept separate: the humanitarian work that had defined my adult life, the family business I'd deliberately left behind, the personal relationships I'd allowed to wither during my self-imposed exile. Jason observed this evolution with characteristic directness. "So you're really doing this? Splitting your time between continents? Between humanitarian work and family business?" "Not splitting," I corrected, the distinction important. "Integrating. Creating something new that honors both paths." He studied me thoughtfully. "It suits you. This both an approach rather than either or. You seem whole in a way I haven't seen before." The observation resonated with unexpected truth. The compartmentalization that had once felt necessary for survival, family versus work, past versus future, Portland versus Myanmar, had actually fragmented essential parts of myself. Integration wasn't compromise, but completion. My final day in Myanmar arrived too quickly. Last-minute meetings, implementation timelines, emotional goodbyes with team members who had become family during these years of intensive work. 3 weeks, I promised Jason as we stood at departures. I'll be back in 3 weeks to finalize the first production contracts to ensure the housing project transitions smoothly. He nodded, the skepticism I expected replaced with something like understanding. The team can handle things, and this new direction, it has potential beyond what we initially saw. Thank you, I said simply, for holding everything together while I figured this out, for seeing possibilities rather than just complications. That's why we work well together. He smiled, a hint of something deeper than professional appreciation in his eyes. Different perspectives, shared values. The long flight home, and Portland was undeniably home again, gave me time to reflect on the transformation of the past month. From betrayal to reconciliation, from division to integration, from competing values to complementary strengths. Daniel met me at the airport, something that would have been unimaginable weeks earlier. His familiar efficiency was present in the precise timing of his arrival just as I cleared customs but softened by genuine welcome. "How was it?" he asked, taking my bag with unexpected thoughtfulness. "Productive, exciting." The artisan groups immediately grasped what we're trying to build. Their questions were insightful, focused on sustainability, on genuine partnership rather than tokenism. He nodded, analyst mind clearly processing implications. Matches what we're hearing from potential retail partners here. The integrated model resonates with current market trends toward ethical sourcing, authentic storytelling. The casual "we" felt significant. Daniel including me in the business evolution that had happened during my absence, assuming collaborative leadership rather than competitive positioning. "Rebecca's at the house," he continued as we drove through Portland's familiar streets. "She's excited to show you the renovation progress. Contractors started last week on the main floor conversion." The house looked different as we approached. Construction, equipment in the driveway, windows open to accommodate workers moving between spaces, a large dumpster containing demolished interior walls and outdated fixtures. "Emily!" Rebecca called from the porch, waving with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Perfect timing. The contractor needs decisions about the meeting room layout. The next few hours passed in collaborative planning, reviewing architectural drawings, discussing material choices, debating functional versus aesthetic priorities. Rebecca surprised me with her practical vision, her understanding of how physical space influences interaction. "The main conference table here," she suggested, indicating the former living room's bay window area. Natural light for meetings, view of the garden. Display shelving along this wall for artisan products, historical pieces from Dad's collection intermixed to show continuity. "Perfect," I agreed, seeing how she'd naturally integrated past and future in the physical design. "What about upstairs?" "Master bedroom converted to your Portland apartment," she said matter-of-factly. "Ensuite, bath updated but maintaining original fixtures Mom loved. Second bedroom for visiting artisans or team members. Third as Zach's space when he stays over." The casual inclusion of permanent space for me, for my nephew, for the extended family we were creating through business partnerships. It embodied everything we were building together. "You've thought of everything," I said, genuine appreciation in my voice. Rebecca shrugged, but couldn't hide her pleasure at the acknowledgement. "It's what I'm good at. Details, organization, making spaces work for people." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." That evening, we gathered for dinner at Daniel's downtown condo. A celebration of sorts, marking 1 month since my return to Portland had upended all our expectations. Uncle Robert joined us, his presence a tangible connection to our parents, to the legacy we were reshaping. "To Margaret and Thomas," he proposed, raising his glass as we settled around Daniel's minimalist dining table, who would be immensely proud of what their children have created from initial conflict. "To Mom and Dad," we echoed, the simple toast acknowledging the foundation beneath our emerging future. "I have something to share," Daniel said as we finished the main course. He rose, retrieving an envelope from his desk across the room. The final appraisal from Vivian Zhao. Completed yesterday. He slid the document to the center of the table, where we could all see the official valuation of Chen Family Imports, its assets, inventory, client relationships, and projected growth. Potential under various operational scenarios. The figure at the bottom of the page, significantly higher than Daniel and Rebecca's initial selling plans had suggested, represented more than financial worth. It quantified the value of our father's life work, our mother's supporting partnership, the legacy they had built together through decades of careful cultivation. "This is what we almost lost," Daniel said quietly, voicing what we all recognized. Not just the monetary value, but everything it represents. The relationships Dad built. The quality standards Mom insisted upon. The reputation that can't be replicated through simple asset transfer. But we didn't lose it, Rebecca pointed out, because Emily came home, because she fought for what was right, because she had the vision to see potential where we saw only problems to solve. I shook my head, uncomfortable with this framing that placed me as singular hero rather than acknowledging our collective transformation. Because we found a way forward together, each contributing what the others needed most. Uncle Robert smiled, satisfaction evident in his expression. Integration rather than division. Exactly what Margaret hoped for when she created her contingency plans. "Speaking of integration," Daniel said, returning to business mode that now felt comfortably familiar rather than coldly exclusionary, "the bank approved our restructuring proposal. New legal entity established with all three of us as equal partners. Profit-sharing model aligned with the framework we developed. Charitable foundation designation for the social enterprise division. And I've scheduled the first artisan visit for next month," Rebecca added. "The women's weaving collective Emily connected with in the eastern sector. 2 representatives coming for training, product development, cultural exchange. Zach is already planning their welcome dinner." The casual coordination between siblings who had barely spoken civilly a month earlier felt like the most significant achievement of all. Not the business valuation, not the restructured legal entity, but the rhythm of collaboration emerging from former conflict. After dinner, I stepped onto Daniel's balcony, taking a moment alone with the Portland skyline spread before me. The city looked different somehow. Not just the new buildings that had appeared during my absence, but my perspective on this place I'd once been so eager to escape. Uncle Robert joined me, his presence comfortable in shared silence before he finally spoke. "You've done something remarkable, Emily. All 3 of you have." "We're still figuring it out," I acknowledged. "The business transition, the balance between my work there and here, the family relationships. Nothing's perfect yet." "Perfect isn't the goal," he said simply. "Integration is. Finding wholeness that honors different parts rather than forcing false unity." The distinction resonated deeply. We weren't creating perfect harmony but functional integration. Daniel's business acumen with my humanitarian vision, with Rebecca's organizational skills. Not minimizing our differences, but leveraging them toward shared purpose. "Mom understood that, didn't she?" I said, the realization crystallizing. In all her contingency planning, her separate trusts, her careful notes about who should receive, which treasures. She wasn't trying to make us the same. She was creating structure that would help us value our differences. Uncle Robert nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Margaret always saw her children clearly, strengths, weaknesses, potential. She knew what might happen after she was gone, but she also knew what could happen if you found your way, back to each other. Inside, I could hear Zach's laughter mixing with adult conversation, Rebecca describing renovation details, Daniel explaining financing structures, family, business, legacy, future. All intertwined in ways I couldn't have imagined when that first devastating email had arrived in Myanmar. I still need to return, I said, voicing the reality that remained despite all our progress. The housing projects, the artisan partnerships, they need my presence at least periodically. Of course, Uncle Robert agreed. That's your work, your calling. The integration doesn't mean erasing what makes you distinct. But Portland is home base now, I continued, the commitment feeling right rather than restrictive. The family, business is part of my work too. The house is home again. He squeezed my shoulder gently. Margaret would be particularly pleased by that. The house remaining in family hands, being repurposed rather than sold to strangers. Thomas, too, seeing the business evolve rather than dissolve. We rejoined the others inside, where conversation had shifted to upcoming operational timelines, product development schedules, renovation completion targets, marketing launch strategies. The business details intermingled with family planning, Zach's soccer tournament, holiday gathering possibilities, Uncle Robert's travel schedule. As the evening concluded, we stood together at the elevator, three siblings who had nearly destroyed their shared inheritance now united in preserving and transforming it. 3 weeks until you return to Myanmar, Daniel confirmed, always tracking schedules, timelines, operational logistics. Yes, but it's a short trip this time, 10 days maximum. The team there is managing well, and the first artisan production contracts are nearly ready for signature. Rebecca checked her calendar app. Perfect timing. The main floor renovation should be complete by then. We can host the first official Chen Family Enterprises meeting in the new conference room when you return. Chen Family Enterprises, I repeated, appreciating the name we'd selected together, acknowledging our heritage while creating space for evolution beyond imports alone. As I prepared to leave, Zach surprised me with a fierce hug. You're really coming back, right? Not disappearing again for years? The directness of children, cutting through adult complexities to essential truth. Really coming back, I promised. This is home now. You're stuck with your aunt as a regular presence. Daniel drove me to the house, my house now too, with the master bedroom conversion nearing completion as my Portland apartment. The porch light glowed welcomingly as we pulled into the driveway, illuminating the Chen Family Enterprises temporary sign Rebecca had proudly installed above the front door. See you tomorrow at the warehouse, Daniel confirmed as I gathered my bags. 9 a.m. production meeting with the catalog designers. I'll be there, I promised, the commitment feeling natural rather than obligatory. Inside, despite ongoing renovation, chaos. The house felt alive again, not just with construction activity, but with purpose, with future, with the integration of past values and present vision. Mom's careful preservation of family treasures. Dad's lifelong building of business relationships. My humanitarian commitment. Daniel's strategic thinking. Rebecca's organizational skills, all finding expression in this evolving legacy. I climbed the stairs to my partially renovated bedroom, where contractors had preserved the pale blue walls of my childhood while updating everything else for adult functionality. From the window seat, where I'd once dreamed of changing the world, I could now see both backward and forward, honoring where I'd come from while creating space for where I was going. On the bedside table, Rebecca had placed a framed photograph I hadn't seen before. Mom and Dad standing proudly outside Chen Family Imports on its opening day decades earlier, their expressions capturing that unique blend of terror and excitement that accompanies new beginnings. Beside it lay a handwritten note in Rebecca's distinctive script. Welcome home, Emily. Thank you for fighting for what matters. For all of us. I traced the words with my fingertip, feeling the weight of the journey from betrayal to reconciliation, from division to integration, from inheritance nearly lost to legacy reborn. Outside, Portland's familiar rain began to fall, a gentle percussion against the window panes. Inside, in this house that had sheltered generations of my family, I was finally home. Not despite my global work, but inclusive of it. Not separate from my siblings, but connected through newfound understanding, not divided between competing values, but integrated in purpose that honored them all. The inheritance my siblings had tried to divide while I was overseas had become something more valuable than any of us had initially imagined. Not just financial assets or family treasures, but the foundation for a shared future that honored our parents' legacy while creating space for each child's unique contribution. The letter Mom left with her attorney had indeed changed everything, not simply by preventing injustice, but by guiding us toward possibility none of us could have created alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.